The remarkable Sloth of Plymouth Rock. A hush fell over the academic panel at the prestigious Harvard History Colloquium. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman whose name was synonymous with groundbreaking primary source research, adjusted her spectacles. On the projector screen behind her, a faded, century-old photograph depicted a young man leaning against a stone wall, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, an expression of profound, almost religious apathy painted across his face. "Gentlemen, ladies," Dr. Reed began, her voice cutting through the silence. "The history of American exceptionalism is often a tale of relentless, almost manic drive. From the Puritan work ethic to the titans of the Industrial Revolution, we celebrate those who built and strained. Today, I want to talk about a man who built nothing, strained less, and yet, through his prodigious, if utterly misdirected, intellect, shaped one of the most significant architectural and historical preservation efforts in Massachusetts history. I speak of Obadiah Thorne, the laziest boy in Plymouth." Chapter 1. The Cornerstone of Indolence. Obadiah Thorne was born in the small, history-steeped town of Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1901. His family tree was rooted deep in the New England soil, tracing a clear, unbroken line back to one of the original signatories of the Mayflower Compact. This ancestral legacy, rather than inspiring ambition, seemed to have imbued Obi with a sense of entitlement to rest. He viewed effort as a betrayal of his noble heritage. His ancestors had done the heavy lifting, and now it was his turn to reap the cosmic siesta. At school, Obi's report cards were a bizarre testament to his nature. His marks in mathematics and Latin were always stellar, often scoring perfect marks without appearing to take notes or study. His teachers would laud his innate genius, only to follow it immediately with a lamentation over his utter, staggering lack of application. He would complete assignments only under duress, usually minutes before the deadline, and his essays, while brilliant in their analysis, were almost always submitted on crumpled paper with coffee rings. His physical state mirrored his mental posture. He moved slowly, as if resisting the very friction of the earth. He was known to spend entire afternoons on the town square bench, ostensibly watching the pigeons, but in reality observing the flow of pedestrian traffic with the detached curiosity of a natural philosopher studying Brownian motion. The local newspaper once ran a tongue-in-cheek piece titled "Obadiah Thorne, the Human Sundial, reliable indicator of noon, because that's when he finally moves." The general consensus in Plymouth was simple. Obi was a wasted talent, a genius drowned in a vat of molasses. Chapter 2. The Great Wharf Debate of 1920. The year 1920 marked the 300th anniversary of the Pilgrims' landing, a massive cultural and economic event for Plymouth. The town was buzzing with plans for monuments, commemorative plaques, and most importantly, the preservation of the iconic Plymouth Rock. For decades, the Rock, a symbol of America's beginning, had been a source of historical headache. It had been cracked, moved, and chipped away at by souvenir seekers. The major preservation project involved moving the rock to a new, protected canopy and reconstructing the historic wharf area surrounding it. The City Council and the Plymouth Antiquarian Society, PAS, hired the highly regarded Boston-based firm of Atherton and Finch civil engineers to lead the restoration. Their plan was straightforward: dredge the area, build a new granite seawall, and reconstruct a historically accurate timber wharf based on the 17th century descriptions. Obi, now 19, was working, or rather not working, as a part-time, highly irregular errand boy for his uncle's hardware store situated near the waterfront. One sweltering July afternoon, Mr. Atherton, the chief engineer, was holding court in a coffee shop, sketching the new wharf layout on a napkin for the mayor. Obie, nursing a glass of iced tea with minimal effort, was listening. Mr. Atherton explained the final crucial phase. We have to calculate the total lateral displacement force of the incoming tide against the new vertical granite seawall. If the wall is too rigid, the repeated pressure will cause micro-fissures in the bedrock holding the rock's foundation. Our current calculations show we need a concave curve in the seawall facing the harbor, a radius of r equals 42.5 feet to distribute the force correctly. Obie, without looking up, cleared his throat. That's wrong, sir, he mumbled. The table went silent. Mr. Atherton, a man of 50 with a stiff collar and an even stiffer reputation, raised an eyebrow. I beg your pardon, young man. The radius, Obie sighed, finally looking up, his eyes conveying a struggle to keep them open. The tidal range in this specific micro-harbor is compounded by the offshore sandbar's influence on the ebb current. Your firm's calculations for the tidal coefficient are standard, but the historical data from the 1888 Naval Observatory log shows the average high tide is 1.3 feet lower in July and August than your firm assumed, due to an anomalous thermocline effect impacting the local density of the water. Furthermore, a concave radius of 42.5 feet will create a Venturi effect at the northern end of the wharf during peak current, causing localized severe erosion under the historic cobblestone pavement, the very thing you are trying to preserve. He paused, took a slow sip of tea, and concluded, It's simple hydrodynamics, really. He then slid off his chair, yawned dramatically, and shuffled out the door, leaving the engineers and the mayor staring at the napkin, which now seemed to be mocking them. Chapter 3. The Proving of the Parabola. The engineering firm was understandably insulted. They dismissed Obie's interruption as the ramblings of a local eccentric. But the mayor, a man named Harrington, was a Plymouth native who remembered Obie's unnerving academic brilliance. He had also lost a considerable amount of sleep worrying about the rock's stability. Mr. Harrington secretly ordered the engineers to check the 1888 Naval Observatory log Obie had referenced. To their astonishment, the log existed, buried deep in the town archive, and the tidal variance was precisely as Obie had stated. Obie had performed a complex calculation involving fluid dynamics, historical meteorology, and structural engineering, a task that would take a team of professional engineers weeks in the time it took to finish a glass of iced tea. The engineering, swallowing their pride, presented the new design to the council, omitting the source. But the mayor was honest. He called a town meeting. The integrity of our tercentenary project was saved not by the renowned firm we hired, but by a young man among us. He is perhaps known more for his leisurely pace, but his mind is nothing short of miraculous. He recounted the entire coffee shop scene. Obie, who had somehow been pressured into attending the meeting, stood at the back, looking as if he wished the floor would swallow him whole.
Chapter 4. The Unwilling Oracle. The news of Obie's astonishing intervention didn't just save the Plymouth Rock project. It changed his life, much to his own chagrin. He was no longer just the town's lazy boy. He was the town's unwilling oracle. The mayor, recognizing the value of a genius who cost nothing, found a way to utilize Obie's intelligence with minimal disruption to his preferred state of repose. Obie was given a small, windowless office in the basement of the town hall, a space he affectionately called the sarcophagus, and a standing instruction. Never come in unless you feel like it, but whenever a genuinely impossible problem arises, we will bring the problem to you. This suited Obi perfectly. He could maintain his rigorous schedule of napping and contemplation, only engaging his brain when the challenge was intellectually worthy of his time. His next major contribution was in the realm of historical accuracy. The Tercentenary Committee was planning to rebuild an authentic pilgrim meeting house. They had a single, damaged inventory list from 1627, detailing the contents, but no architectural drawings. The chief historian, Professor Albright, was stumped by a single line in the inventory: 4 by Gertz of 3rd degree pine. "What is a Gert?" Professor Albright lamented to Obi, who was lying flat on his back on the office rug, reading an Italian grammar textbook. "And 3rd degree? It's not a standard timber measurement. We need to know the load-bearing column's dimensions to reconstruct the roof structure." Obi sighed, marking his place in the book with a bookmark. A Gert is an archaic English term for a beam that supports floor joists. The 3rd degree pine isn't a grade, it's a positional reference, an indication of the beam's placement in the structural frame. The Pilgrims, being highly literate in navigational geometry and shipbuilding manuals, used a specific common geometric ratio for their non-standard building components, likely derived from the golden ratios approximation in 17th century Dutch carpentry manuals. The 3rd degree refers to the 3rd major structural component after the sills and the corner posts, which would be the tie beam that supports the roof truss. Therefore, Obi continued, without a single reference book, a Gert of 3rd degree pine refers to the primary horizontal crossmember supporting the roof's central ridge beam. Given the average span of a 17th century meeting house of that size, the tie beam's cross-section must be 12 inches by 16 inches, hand-hewn, to support a single-ridge roof structure against a New England snow load. The inventory list is giving you a structural dimension, not a lumber grade. Professor Albright was speechless. The construction of the meeting house proceeded perfectly based on a single throwaway analysis from a man who refused to sit at a desk. Chapter 5. The Legacy of Low-Effort Genius. Obi Thorne never became a celebrated engineer, a famous historian, or a wealthy man. He continued to live a life of resolute, deliberate non-action. He never married, never owned a car, and worked for the town hall for 35 years, rarely showing up but solving every major historical and engineering puzzle that came across the mayor's desk. His interventions in Plymouth are now legendary. The Rock Foundation. His convex seawall design for Plymouth Rock stands to this day, having withstood nearly a century of coastal storms, exactly as predicted. The Meeting House. The structure, built using his calculated timber dimensions, is considered one of the most historically accurate colonial reconstructions in the Northeast. The Burial Hill Map. He corrected the dating of over 40 colonial-era gravestones on Burial Hill by cross-referencing the inscription fonts with specific, localized stonemason guild patterns from London and Bristol in the 1630s and 40s. Obadiah Thorne died peacefully in 1968 in his sleep, which according to locals was indistinguishable from his waking life. He left behind no papers, no notebooks, and no significant personal possessions. Dr. Reed looked up from her notes at the Harvard colloquium. The photograph of the lazy, apathetic young man was still on the screen. O.B. Thorne, Dr. Reed concluded, was an intellectual powerhouse who treated his own genius as an unfortunate, necessary burden. He represents a profound paradox in the American narrative, that deep, incisive thought can sometimes be more productive than ceaseless, frantic labor. He did not build a corporation, or command an army, or write a definitive book. He simply preserved the physical roots of our nation by doing the absolute minimum required of his extraordinary mind. He applied the least amount of effort necessary to achieve the maximum, most enduring result. He applied the least amount of effort necessary to achieve the maximum, most enduring result. And that, gentlemen and ladies, Dr. Reed smiled, is perhaps the most astonishing and most American form of efficiency there is. The audience, composed of the most ambitious, driven historians in the country, erupted in astonished, appreciative applause for the man who was demonstrably, unequivocally, the laziest genius in American history.